And I realised that actually we should have had somebody from a company, and I think we failed on that. But we can discuss it in general. So we'll talk about our aims. We'll talk about what we mean and how we measure, and we'll talk about how we get there. We have to talk about the tools. And in the final session, which is a little bit more informal, with a number of sort of panelists presenting their thoughts based on our discussions and their own feelings. We try to get some ideas going forward, some tools, some mechanisms, some concluding thoughts. So welcome to all of you. Apologies from Malala. We've also had another apology in the last day, and Jeanette Davis unfortunately is not well, so she can't come. We also had an apology from Martine Virengo from Geneva, who can't come. She's actually supervising 2 PhDs today and had no choice. But we have many lovely colleagues here, and I think that will be absolutely fine. So finally, thanks again to our sponsors, the Ford Foundation in Europe. Thanks to colleagues from the European who helped produce this event, Jacob Buvana, and also the new director, my successor Hartmut Meyer, is here, which is lovely. Now I really want to pass to Devaki, who's our sort of inspirer, our encourager, our cajoler, our mentor. And you've seen her bio. She's had a lifetime of wonderful experience. And really this is this is your event, but it's also in honor of you. So, please enjoy this. Please feel you're amongst friends. And please, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for all of you for joining us today. I particularly want to thank Paul for not only straining himself to do all this, because he's had a major loss, that he lost his stepfather just 10 days ago, and in spite of that he's pulled together this conference, for which I really love you. And also for outlining the past and the present and the future so that we know what that happened. But I would like to point to Elke because she did the torch meeting, and that's really started the ball rolling both in my mind and elsewhere. And though Paul has done a very, very valuable description of that conference and the report is here, it was, in my opinion and my experience, unique in that we didn't have any structure at all. We just allowed a philosopher, for example. We first said Roger Crisp will speak about what moral philosophers think about inequality. Then Hartley had spoken, the economist then said, but that's not how we see it. So we just allowed people to talk across disciplines without papers. And in a way, my hope was, and here I'll bring an idiom from Indian mythology, that there's a mythology that one of our gods churned the ocean and nectar came out of it. So the idea was to churn the minds of people with different disciplines, talking to each other without papers. So I used to say it was like the 12 apostles sitting around Christ's table. We were 12 and we just talked to each other. Diane was there and Elke was there, and I hope they think that my description is not wrong. Anyway, thank you for going over that. That was very helpful. I was very tempted when we were having this to be what is typical of old people, in this case an old woman, to reminisce about how Oxford was 55 years ago. But it'll probably distract you, so I won't do it. But if you're interested, please say yes, and I'll tell you what it was like. Because I was a student here 55 years ago. And it seems a very long time. I can't believe I've lived that long. But it was a village, and some of the striking things about that era was that you would see in St. Giles Enid Starkey walking with red clothes, and then there was a lot of talk about who was a girlfriend of who. There were a lot of that extraordinary liberated kind of feeling amongst the dons. There was Iris, there was Peter Adie, there was Enid Starkey, and St. Giles was very different at that time from what you see now. So that era somehow had another aspect which I want to bring out, which is relevant to what we are doing today. Ever so often, like suppose when I was here, there would be some stunning book or theory that would come out. It would capture the minds of everybody. At my time, it was Hart's Concept of Law. Once that book came out, whether you were an economist, a scientist, everyone was talking of Hart and law. And sometime later, it was linguistic philosophy. But now that I've returned at least every year for the last 5-6 years, the colleges have changed. There's so many more. There's much more science, technology interest. The interest in philosophical discourse, in legal discourse as a principal issue, I think has withered away. That's my sense. So I'm so glad that with Paul's collaboration, we could come back to thinking on ideas and talking about ideas across difference. So that's our hope. But I don't know, you should tell me whether Oxford is finished by being a great intellectual place. So Paul has already talked about the seminar that we had, and I just want to again just underline that it was a feast. And we came across, for example, in the unpacking of inequality, we came across discrimination, difference, injustice, ignorance, power, selfishness, altruism, apart from reasoning, as some of the triggers of that phenomenon. Not surprisingly, race, gender, caste, wealth, income, knowledge, inequalities was embedded in each of these embodies. So it was a kind of capsule of all that leads inequality. I have a view on this, and though my paper later will not flesh it out too much, I don't think it's a new finding that inequality, injustice, discrimination, exclusion, oppression, violence have all been lived experience of women and the LGBT communities. This was no surprise to persons like me who have been walking with, and in some sense being inside, the women's movement in India for more than 40 years, beginning in 1975. It is also therefore not surprising that one of the goals that was put forward by us, the women's movement, the academics and the activists within it, as well as the government and the UN system, was to drive out gender inequalities. Even while this was being proposed as the overall aim, many of us doubted its appropriateness. It seemed that the aim to catch up with men was not good enough, and gender equality was basically, at that time, articulated as equal to men in all positions. So many of us felt that catching up with men was not good enough. We mocked at it, asking, do we want to eat a piece of the poisoned cake? Meaning the cake that the men had baked. Most important of all, since we were very critical of the macro policies and the quality of political institutions, we argued that we would lay our own table and sit around it. We did not want to join the men's table. So there was that tension even then, that do we want to do this kind of thing? Thus the idea was to argue that we women, strengthened by the idea of feminism, would rebuild knowledge, institutions drawn from our own knowledge, experience and ethics, and not get into the race of an equal share in the spaces occupied by men. In the course of the seminar, we will unfold these arguments, I'm sure, and hopefully find some ways forward in the quest for justice for all. So on behalf of Paul and all of you, in a way we are all together in this, I welcome you to the seminar, and once again thank Paul and European for organizing it. Thank you.
Great, okay, so we're going to move swiftly on to the first session. We had a discussion before. We thought that it's better to chair it from here, and then people can see the slides.
So that Elika comes
So
here.
Elika will come here.
And also the two speakers?
Yes, and then if they want to stand by the lectern, they'll go up there.
Oh, I see.
Okay. But, so Anthony's already there,
Oh, okay.
and Diane.
And Diane's here.
I shall go there when it's my turn.
Okay, so you're happy just to stay? But then both of you don't need to
well, I
move.
don't.
Definitely doesn't need to move.
Okay, you stay.
Okay.
Oh, I could you to sit here?
Yeah, that's it. People are going to speak from where they are.
But I'm not a speaker now.
No, it's okay. Otherwise, I don't have company up here. So. Okay, well, you're all very welcome. I'd just like to, endorse and support what Paul and Devika have already said. And it's delightful to see, as it were, the second stage of this conversation a year on here in Oxford. And to look forward to pursuing those interdisciplinary comparative pathways that I think were so constructive and helpful to think through, to think with last year. So this session, this opening session is raises the question of reinterpreting gender and inequality, and to do so, we have two speakers, Anthony Heath, who's already up at the screen, and Diane Elson, who was there also last year at the first workshop. Anthony is